Hi, I'm Marjorie, and my son told me not to come to my husband's funeral, as if it were just a scheduling issue, not a decision to erase me from my own life. They said it would be less tense without me there, but what they really meant was, you're not part of this family anymore. One day, I was a wife and a mother. The next, I was a ghost, scrubbed from photos, ignored in group texts, cut off from the home I helped build. But here's the thing. If they went this far to shut me out, what else were they hiding? And how long had they been planning it? Would you want to know what your family's been doing behind your back? Or is it safer not to look? I was folding laundry in the kitchen when the phone rang. The sun had finally broken through the gray clouds that seemed to blanket Eugene each March, casting a soft glow across the wooden floor. It warmed my shoulders as I sorted socks and tucked Franklin's last cardigan, still smelling faintly of cedar, into a drawer I'd already opened twice by habit. I'd been trying to keep busy. The silence in the house had grown heavier since his passing 2 days ago. I hadn't touched the black dress hanging on the bedroom door, but I knew I'd need it soon. The funeral, as far as I understood, was being planned by Travis and Callista. They hadn't asked for my input, but I assumed I'd be there. His wife of 41 years. When I saw Travis's name flash on the screen, my heart lifted a little. Finally. Maybe he wanted to check on me or discuss arrangements. I answered with more warmth than I expected to muster. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my voice just a bit too hopeful. He didn't waste time. "Mom, we've talked about it, and we think it's best if you don't come to Dad's funeral." For a moment, the room vanished. My breath stopped. I looked around like maybe the walls would offer some explanation. "What?" I whispered. His tone was calm, almost clinical. "We don't want the day to be tense. There's been too much strain. It's not personal." "It's not personal?" I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. "Travis, I'm his wife." He hesitated just a beat. "We've talked about this. You've made things harder than they needed to be." That line landed like a slap. I didn't argue, didn't cry. I just stood there, holding a towel that had once wrapped around Franklin's shoulders. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Okay," I said quietly, and hung up. The room felt colder. My hands trembled as I reached for the counter. I called him back immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I dialed Callista. No answer. I texted her. "Please tell me this isn't real." Silence. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. The neighbor's dog barked in the distance, and the wind shifted the tulips in my yard. Life, it seemed, went on elsewhere. I tried the funeral home next. I'd been there with Franklin's parents years ago. The receptionist's voice was overly sweet. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't release those details. Only the designated family representative is authorized to handle arrangements." I didn't ask who that was. I already knew. I opened my laptop and checked my emails. Nothing. The shared family calendar, once used to plan holidays and birthdays, was now empty of my entries. The latest event, Franklin's service, Portland Chapel, was marked private. The family group chat, once titled The Five of Us, was now just The Four. I wasn't in it. I opened the obituary site. My eyes scanned every line twice. It listed Franklin's children, his grandchildren, his community service, his golf league, and then the closing sentence. "He is survived by his beloved children, who carry on his legacy." No mention of me, not even my name. It wasn't just exclusion. It wasn't oversight. It was deliberate. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but weaponized. I sat back in my chair, trying to remember the last thing I'd said to him before the hospital stay. I couldn't. Grief had already blurred the edges of everything. I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased. I didn't sleep, not truly. I closed my eyes, but that call kept replaying. Travis's voice so composed, so stripped of emotion. I tried to convince myself it was just stress talking, that he would call back. But morning came, and the silence had settled into something heavier. The house was quiet, save for the sound of the fridge humming. I hadn't turned the television on, didn't touch the radio. I laid in bed longer than usual, staring at the framed photo of our wedding on the nightstand. Franklin in his navy suit, me in a gown borrowed from my sister. It was the only photo we'd framed ourselves. My fingers rested on the glass, like touching it might make the memory sturdier. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Denise, a friend from church. I saw the photo from the funeral. Why weren't you in it? I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen. I opened Facebook, heart pounding like I'd been caught doing something wrong. There it was, posted by Callista. A group shot, taken beside the casket. Travis stood in the center, hands folded, looking solemn. Callista held little Owen, and beside them were the other kids, all in their Sunday best. But I wasn't there. Caption: all of us together, just like Dad would have wanted. All of us. The words hit harder than the photo. My absence wasn't just tolerated. It was curated, published, and offered as a tribute. I clicked through the album. No mention, no tag, no trace. Later that afternoon, while tidying up the living room, I opened my laptop again. This time, it was a slideshow shared by Travis's cousin, a life well lived Franklin Wells. It started with baby pictures, graduation, wedding. Except not our wedding. The only nod to our marriage was a group shot of Franklin and the kids at a backyard barbecue. Callista had captioned it, "His greatest joy." I leaned back, eyes stinging, my hands curled into fists. And I was just what? I whispered to no one. The woman who cooked the ribs? The air felt heavier after that. I stopped the slideshow and closed the laptop. I walked through the house, moving slowly. The baseboards Franklin installed when we first bought the place. The bookshelf we built together, where our photo albums gathered dust. The armchair he always favored, still dented just right. I touched the doorknob to his office, then let my hand fall. Grief is funny. It clings to objects. It nests in the ordinary. Yet online, I didn't exist. No one had tagged me. No one mentioned me. No one asked where I was in public comment threads. Only Denise, privately, quietly. Back in the bedroom, I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked again at our wedding photo. I remembered the vows, the rain that threatened but never came, the way Franklin had squeezed my hand during the reception speech. Somewhere between then and now, they decided my role had ended before his heart had. I wasn't just forgotten, I was replaced. And that hurt in a new way. The silence had sharpened overnight. No apology came, no explanation, no trace of reconsideration. The image of my family at Franklin's funeral, the caption, the absence, it all clung to me like a sour taste that wouldn't rinse out. But something else had begun to gnaw at me too. If they were willing to erase me publicly, what else had they quietly undone? It started with a drawer. Late morning, after brewing a second pot of coffee I didn't finish, I opened the bottom file drawer in Franklin's old desk. I hadn't touched it since before his hospital stay. Receipts, warranty slips, manila folders labeled in his tidy handwriting, everything was as I remembered. I found the folder marked Property, Willamette House. Inside was the deed to our home, dated from the year we bought it. Both our names, side by side, printed in clear ink. I pulled out my phone and called the county records office, the one where Franklin and I had once stood in line to register the original papers. A young man answered, sounded barely out of college. Public records? Sure, I can check that address. I gave it to him. There was a pause, fingers clicking across a keyboard. Then, looks like there was a title transfer about 3 months ago. New listing has one name, Travis Wells. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed even. And the previous co-owner? He hesitated. Removed. Paperwork was filed electronically. I thanked him, hung up, and sat motionless. I wasn't on the deed anymore. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. Instead, I started mapping. My mind went back to late December. Franklin had asked me to sign a refinancing document. I remember looking it over and saying, "We should get this notarized properly." He agreed, said we'd do it after the holidays. That moment, seemingly insignificant then, now lodged in my chest. I opened the laptop, pulled up old emails. I searched for any signed documents, any permissions I'd sent. Nothing. Then I checked the bank statements, starting from January. That's when the other shoes began to drop. Deposits that had once gone into our joint account had stopped. I saw lines referencing T. Wells Holdings, a name I didn't recognize, but it was appearing on utilities, mortgage auto payments, even insurance. I flipped through paper statements. My name had disappeared from correspondence as early as February. There was no note, no discussion, just erasure. I pulled out an older folder labeled Taxes Joint. Inside were returns we'd filed together. I scanned the names, the signatures, our joint status. It all once felt like stone. Now it read like an expired agreement. And that's when I saw it, tucked behind the tax papers, a sticky note in Franklin's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just 3 words. Ask Marjorie first. Maybe he meant it for a contractor. Maybe it was for something else. But in that moment, I clung to it like a lifeline. At least at some point, my consent mattered. My voice had been expected. But now, the documents didn't lie. I hadn't just been emotionally pushed aside. I was being legally erased. I closed the file cabinet and sat down with a yellow legal pad. I started writing dates, names, transactions. Not because I knew what to do next, but because I needed to see the pattern. They hadn't just kept me from the funeral. They'd begun preparing for my absence long before Franklin's body was cold. I went digging for closure. Instead, I unearthed the beginning of something calculated. The night had left me restless, and by morning, I couldn't shake the growing pressure building behind my ribs. The silence from Travis wasn't just insulting anymore. It was strategic. I stood in Franklin's old office, staring at the locked drawer beneath his bookshelf. It hadn't been opened since his hospital stay, maybe longer. I found the spare key behind the frame of his degree, exactly where he always kept it. Inside were notebooks, old receipts, envelopes, most of them unopened bills or newsletters. But tucked in the middle was a plain, creased envelope. My name, Marjorie, was scrawled on the front in Franklin's familiar hand. The date in the corner was less familiar, mid-January, just weeks before everything fell apart. I sat down at his desk and opened it slowly. His writing, though shakier than usual, held its usual deliberateness. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get a chance to say everything out loud. My breath caught. I felt you pulling away, not in distance, but in sadness. I wish I had done more to fix that. I let Travis talk circles around me. I let Callista flatter me out of decisions. I didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to see what was happening. I turned the page, fingers trembling. If something happens to me and they try to shut you out, please know, I never agreed to that. I never wanted you erased. You've been my only constant. The only person who showed up for everything, even when I didn't ask. I covered my mouth with my hand. He had known. I left something else behind, at the home, a recording. I asked Nurse Ellie to hold it for you if things went wrong. Please go get it. You deserve that much. That was it. No signature, no dramatic farewell. Just his truth, tucked away, never mailed, never mentioned. By early afternoon, I'd driven across town to the nursing home. I hadn't stepped foot there since they wheeled Franklin out the front door, cold and quiet, under a white sheet. When I asked for Ellie at the reception desk, they told me she was just finishing her shift. She appeared a few minutes later, still in scrubs, looking surprised to see me. "Mrs. Wells," she said gently, "I was hoping you'd come." She handed me a small flash drive wrapped in a Post-it with my name. He made me promise to keep this safe. Back in the car, I sat in the parking lot, engine off, flash drive between my palms like it was made of glass. I plugged it into my laptop and held my breath. Franklin's voice came through the speakers, softer than I remembered, but steady. "Marjorie, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And they've gone ahead without you. I closed my eyes. I wanted to say this while I still could. I know Travis and Callista were pushing things. I was starting to forget pieces. They'd remind me of things that never happened, suggest things I didn't say. I tried to hold on to the details, but they moved fast. They brought papers I don't remember signing. If they've shut you out, it's because they thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. There was a pause in the audio, just the sound of his breath. You deserved better. I should have said that more. The recording ended, and for a long moment, I sat with my face buried in my hands, crying. Not because of guilt, but because someone finally acknowledged the truth. He had seen it. He had seen me. Not the version edited out of family albums or group texts. The version who paid the bills, drove him to appointments, held his hand when no one else wanted to talk about the end. By evening, I stood at our kitchen counter, letter in one hand, flash drive in the other. I laid them down beside my phone and poured myself a glass of water. Then I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a message to Travis, not to Callista, not yet. I wrote down a list of every account, every document, every conversation I remembered in detail. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record-keeping, about clarity. I wasn't going to ask to be let back in. I was going to force the door open with evidence. I had my truth. Now it was time to see who else had the courage to face it. The sun hadn't fully risen when my phone buzzed. I was at the kitchen table, sipping weak coffee, and staring at Franklin's letter for what felt like the 100th time. The text lit up the screen, a name I hadn't seen in days. Evie. I miss you. I don't believe what they say. I just don't know what to do. Just one line, but I read it over and over, each word settling differently. My hands shook as I held the phone, torn between wanting to call her and knowing that doing so might only make things worse for her. She was only 13, too young to be caught in this mess, but already old enough to see through the cracks. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know how, but something softened in me. Something stirred. Later that afternoon, my old friend Lorraine called. Have you seen it? She asked, voice low. Seen what? The live stream from the memorial. I thought you were there, until I wasn't so sure. She texted me the link. It had been posted to the community center's website in Portland. I hesitated before pressing play. The screen flickered to Travis, standing behind a podium draped in white flowers. His suit was crisp, his voice steady. Dad was the kind of man who built his life around values, discipline, honor, commitment. He taught us to show up, to work hard, to love fiercely. I waited. He did all this while raising 4 amazing children, each of us carrying a part of his strength forward. Still, I waited. His family was his foundation, his children and grandchildren, his legacy. We will continue to live by his example. That was it. Not a word. Not a single acknowledgement that Franklin had a wife. That he'd shared a life with me longer than Travis had been alive. The crowd clapped. Some even stood. I didn't move. I just sat there in my small living room, hands gripping the edge of my chair. That night, I wrote to him. Not in anger, not in pleading, just truth. Subject about today. Body. I saw your speech. I saw what you didn't say. If this continues, I will respond differently. No warmth, no apology, just warning. And just below my name, I added one more line. CC. Rebecca Hawthorne, legal assistant, Hallgren Law Group. I turned off the computer and made myself a cup of tea, the kind Franklin always said tasted like pine needles. I pulled his letter back out of the drawer, read it slower this time. Every line was underlined by memory now. They're writing me out like I was never here, I said out loud, the words cutting the quiet. But I was here. I still am. At the kitchen table, I opened a blank notebook. I dated the top of the page and wrote the heading, Personal Record, Estate Manipulation and Events Chronology. I listed what I knew, what I'd seen, what I'd heard. I didn't speculate. I documented names, dates, documents I'd found, people who'd spoken, links to video files. This wasn't revenge. This was insurance. Evie's text still hovered in my mind. I just don't know what to do. I couldn't give her answers. Not yet. But maybe one day, when all this settled, she'd look back and know I didn't stay silent. They wanted me to disappear. Instead, I drew a line in the sand. I warned them. What they did next proved they never thought I'd act. The next morning came with a ping. An email from Hallgren Law. My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. Franklin's old attorney, Mr. Hallgren, had written a brief message. As you requested, I'm forwarding this document. Let me know when you're ready to talk next steps. Attached was a scan of a letter, dated the month before Franklin's decline. The subject line read, "If anything changes suddenly." My hands hovered above the keyboard before I opened the file. Franklin's writing, firm, dated, and unambiguous, filled the page. If I'm no longer able to represent myself in matters of the estate or family communication, I ask that my prior wishes be respected, especially those concerning my wife, Marjorie. She is to be consulted on all decisions, and no documents should be altered without her written consent. There it was. No foggy memory, no misunderstanding. It was in writing. Beneath that, a single paragraph changed the temperature of the room. If this letter is being used, I fear my children, particularly Travis and his wife, may be acting beyond my intent. I regret that. I trust you, Hallgren, to act accordingly. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I simply pushed back from the table and stood. By midday, I dialed the funeral home again. Same woman answered, same too bright voice. I need confirmation that a copy of the death certificate was sent to the county, I said, for estate matters. I'm sorry, ma'am, she replied, her tone shifting subtly. We're only authorized to communicate with the family's representative. I breathed in through my nose, slow and deep. I'm Franklin Wells's legal spouse, and I am currently represented by counsel. You may forward any further communication to Hallgren Law. You'll be hearing from them directly. A beat of silence, then, yes, ma'am. Understood. I hung up, clicked open my email client, and began typing. Slow, deliberate strokes. To Travis Wells. CC. Callista Wells. BCC. Rebecca Hawthorne. Hallgren Law. Subject, estate conduct and legal notification. Travis, effective immediately. I am invoking my legal rights under the spousal clause, as defined in Franklin's estate documentation. Any actions related to his property, accounts, or representation moving forward will be subject to legal oversight. All communication should now be routed through Hallgren Law Group. This is not a threat. This is notification. I hit send. No embellishment, no signature flourish, just fact. Then I attached a read receipt. Within 3 minutes, it pinged back. Travis Wells has opened this message. At home, I lit the candle on Franklin's old desk. Not for ceremony, just a habit. I sat for a while, my tea cooling beside me. I wasn't proud of what this was becoming. I never wanted this, but they had mistaken my silence for surrender. I spoke softly, to no one but the shadows in the room. I'm not fighting for money. I'm fighting because I existed, and you cannot erase that. I didn't need a reply. I'd made my move. I came at them with silence and evidence. They came back with fire. It happened on a Monday morning. I was scrolling through my notifications, trying to distract myself with anything that wasn't legal jargon or grief paperwork, when I saw it. A post. Public. Tagged. Callista had written, "Some people can't let go. Even in grief, they make it about themselves." There was no name, no direct accusation, but she didn't need to be that obvious. Everyone knew who she meant. The comments came fast. Some were polite, sending prayers. Others sharper, more pointed. She's always been dramatic. Wasn't she the one who didn't even show up? Let the family grieve in peace. I didn't reply. Not yet. I took screenshots. Every comment, every tag, every subtle dig. I filed them in a folder titled Documentation, Harassment, but it wasn't the post that broke me. It was the ease with which people jumped in, like they'd been waiting for permission. I thought about Franklin, what he'd say if he saw this circus. Then I remembered the nurse, Ellie, at the facility, the one who always offered me a chair when the others wouldn't even acknowledge I was there. By late morning, I was dialing the front desk. I asked for Ellie. She remembered me right away. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "I wanted to say something after he passed, but I didn't know if I had the right." "You do," I said. She sighed. "Your husband, he knew. He told me, 'They're pushing her out, and I can't stop it.' I could see it too. They'd wait until you left to whisper about decisions. He'd get confused, and they'd twist it back on him." My throat tightened. "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" A beat of hesitation. Then, "Yes, I will." That afternoon, I forwarded Ellie's statement to Mr. Halgren and added it to the affidavit we'd been building. My hands no longer trembled when I opened those files. They moved with purpose. Then I opened a photo, one I'd never shared, taken just 2 days before Franklin died, his hand in mine as he rested in that beige recliner by the window. I posted it with no caption except, "He never stopped seeing me, even when others pretended I was gone." No hashtags, no comments allowed. I turned off sharing, just the photo and that one line. It sat quietly for an hour. Then the messages started. Private, direct, quiet but real. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I've been following the posts. That picture, it broke me. Callista's been spinning this story for months. I wish I'd asked more questions." I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. For once, the silence was working in my favor. A neighbor from down the street knocked on my door with a bouquet of white daisies, said she'd seen something online, and just wanted me to know someone was thinking of me. At dusk, I stood in the backyard, watching the wind tug at the hanging laundry I'd nearly forgotten to take down. Franklin would have hated all this digital drama, but he also would have smiled at the quiet justice taking root. The ones who tried to silence me had just handed me the loudest moment of all. The video surfaced the next morning. A friend from Franklin's Rotary Club tagged me in a post that had already been shared a few dozen times. It was a clip from his 70th birthday party, held at the community center in Portland 2 years earlier. Franklin stood at the head of the table, glass in hand, wearing that awful red tie I always hated but never told him. He tapped his glass, waited for silence, and then said, "If you want to know what love looks like, look at her." He pointed right at me. The room laughed, cheered, and someone off-screen said, "You're lucky, Frank." The camera panned to me, smiling, caught mid-laugh. I looked like someone who still believed there was time. It was only 40 seconds long, but it said everything his children had tried to erase. By noon, the clip had made its way around the community page. Comments flooded in, some kind, some shocked. "I never knew they were so close." "Why wasn't she mentioned at the memorial?" "This changes things." But that wasn't the end of it. 2 days later, I stepped into the meeting room at Hallgren Law. It was sterile and quiet, save for the sound of the overhead fan. Travis was already seated, Callista beside him. She wore black again. Grieving chic, I assumed. The estate lawyer, Mr. Carrick, nodded toward a chair across the table. I sat down and placed my folder in front of me. I didn't speak right away. I opened the folder slowly, first laying out the original deed with my name, then the letter Franklin had handwritten, then the printed email from the funeral home refusing to speak with me, then the audio transcript of Franklin's final message, signed and dated by the nurse who witnessed it. Finally, I slid forward printed stills of the viral video, each frame showing his toast and the crowd's response. "This," I said, "is the story you tried to erase. It won't stay buried." Travis's jaw locked. Callista leaned forward, about to say something, then pulled back. Mr. Carrick cleared his throat. "Well, based on these new materials, we'll need to reassess the estate allocation." "No," I interrupted calmly. We won't reassess. We'll honor the original will. You will return what you took, and you'll stop pretending I didn't exist. The silence that followed was its own kind of confession. I didn't need anyone to cry or apologize. I just needed them to stop. By the time I stepped out into the Portland drizzle, the clouds didn't feel as heavy. The air, damp and cold, felt earned, like something washed clean. I texted Hallgren from the car. "Thank you. I'm going to be okay now." And for the first time since Franklin died, I meant it. This was never about money. It was never about control. It was about being seen. About someone finally saying out loud, "She mattered. Justice had been done. But peace is something I would have to make myself." 2 weeks passed, long enough for the paperwork to be finalized, short enough for the sting to remain fresh. I received the envelope from Hallgren Law mid-morning, slid between grocery coupons and a landscaping flyer. Inside, a single sheet. Confirmation that Franklin's original will would be honored. No negotiations, no revisions. A handwritten note from Hallgren accompanied it. "They've agreed to step back. You will retain everything your husband outlined. Quiet resolution, as you preferred." Quiet, but not soft. Travis had been formally reprimanded, discreetly, as these things go. He would not face legal punishment, but his name was flagged in enough professional circles to make any further manipulation difficult. Callista's pristine image in the community, meanwhile, had curdled. Social invitations had slowed. One of her board positions was quietly revoked. No apology ever came. And I didn't need it. Some battles don't need blood. Only truth. The next day, Evie came by. No fanfare. Just a knock at the door, her hands holding a card she clearly made herself. Lined paper, folded unevenly, with a hand-drawn daisy in the corner. Inside, she'd written, "I never believed them. Not really. I just didn't know what to say." I made cocoa for both of us. She sat on the couch, tucked her legs under her like she used to when she was little. We didn't say much. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer speeches. Sometimes the silence between two people is the only apology needed. I reached out and took her hand. She squeezed mine in return. I didn't cry. That night, I opened the door to Franklin's old study, the room that had remained untouched for months. I boxed up the last of his files, donated the old chair with the sunken armrest, and pulled back the drapes. The space looked smaller, somehow. Lighter. I painted the walls a soft sage green and brought in a desk I'd found at a thrift store. On it, I placed a notebook. The first page read, Chapter 1. The day I was erased. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even closure. It was preservation. If they wanted to rewrite history, I would make sure my version existed too. I wasn't planning a book, not yet. But maybe one day, maybe for Evie. In the following weeks, I received cards, messages, a phone call from an old neighbor who hadn't spoken to me since the funeral. One note stood out. It came with no return address, in slanted cursive. "I'm sorry I stayed silent. You deserved better." I placed it next to Franklin's photo, the one where he's smiling without looking at the camera, the one he never liked because he thought it made his chin look soft. I smiled, not for him, but for myself. I had finally reclaimed the space where I had once been written out. What I lost was undeniable: my husband, my status, my illusion of family harmony. But what I gained, that was quieter, deeper. I reclaimed my dignity, my presence, my voice. I wasn't just the widow they tried to erase. I was the witness who stayed, and the legacy they never expected to answer to. And now, I finally rest. Not erased, but engraved in my own truth. Looking back, I've learned that silence is not the same as surrender, and grief doesn't mean giving up your place in the world. I stood in rooms where my name was erased and my love dismissed, but I chose to speak, not with anger, but with truth. And that truth made its way to the surface, piece by piece. If you've ever felt cast aside by those who should have stood beside you, know this: your presence is still power. You matter. even if they pretend you don't. Have you ever experienced a moment where your voice was silenced in your own family? How did you find your way back to yourself? I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, let me know why. Your voice matters here too. And if you'd like to hear more real stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next.